Hello, and welcome back to AdamBobrowConnect, the channel where you email me and we connect. Every once in a while, I find myself sort of looking around and thinking, what do I really enjoy that I don't do as much as I used to? And music was a big part of my upbringing, and I realized just because I'm spending less time in cars, or maybe just this feeling of I should always be productive when I can be. I want to grow table tennis, I want to make things that people can consume that'll help people in table tennis, so I don't stop to make time for music quite as much, and I'm starting to do that more, and I think it's really good for the way I feel, and also enjoying the emails you guys have been sending me. So without further ado, here's an email. Hello Adam, I've been following your channel for some time now and am a subscriber. I first just want to say that your videos are excellent and I love seeing them in my free time. The different kinds of bats in TT always confuse me. What are they and what are their advantages and disadvantages? Do I have to change my game if I play against a person with short pips? If you would, go through the different kinds of rubbers and bats, it would be really nice. Thanks a lot and waiting for a new video. Awesome. Well, thanks for subscribing and I'm thrilled to hear that you enjoy the videos. First of all, if you play against someone with short pips, absolutely. This is why you'll see professionals look at each other's equipment. They will look at their opponent's racket, forehand and backhand, and the blade before they play. Starting with the blade, I won't get so much in detail right now that it should be overwhelming, but a defensive blade tends to be slower and tends to be made more for control, getting the ball back on the table, slowing it down. So choppers tend to use blades that are defensive, which sometimes means they're a little bit larger, the head of the racket, which makes it more likely for them to get the racket on the ball, to make sure they contact the ball. Because unlike an attacker, they don't need as much racket speed and force. So the aerodynamics, it's okay to have one that's a little bit bigger and a little bit slower. Sort of like an outfielder's glove in baseball. Less about speed, more about coverage. The other specifics of blades, there are all sorts of differences, from the types of wood that are used, to how many layers of carbon, to where the carbon is, if it's on the inside, if it's on the outermost part of the blade, which will affect how long the ball sits on the racket or how quickly it bounces off the blade. So different dwell times, different pitch, different sounds, different speeds. But I think more important would be the rubber. If you look at someone's rubber on their racket, the specifics of any inverted rubber, we call it regular because it's the most common, but it's where the pips are turned inwards into the sponge. You want to look at how much sponge a person uses to get a sense of how fast the ball is going to bounce off the racket, or off the rubber for that matter. 2, how much spin they can produce. 3, how far from the table you should stand, what you can expect when they play the ball. Now that's all within the inverted rubber category, inverted or regular socially. Now when you're playing a player who has pips out, the shorter pips or short pips, there's going to be less rotation and a little bit more speed in general, meaning a person can flat hit the ball with a lot of forward motion and less rotation. So you're going to have to play that very differently than someone who plays with inverted rubber. Usually if they attack with short pips, your ball's going to come back into the net because it has less rotation on their shot, so the ball doesn't come up off your rubber, in which case you would need to open your racket a little bit more and or lift when you contact the ball to keep it out of the net. Also tactically, knowing that a person is using short pips, you know they're not able to generate as much spin. Therefore, they're going to play the ball faster and flatter, which means they're going to be less confident if the ball is low and deep on the table. Now this is true for anybody. The deeper on the table or the farther from the net and the lower the ball is, the more challenging it is for the opponent to attack. But especially if they don't have the spin to really add that security to arc the ball up and make it dip back down onto the table. So keeping the ball deep on the table to a short pips player is very important, and they're not quite as affected by your spin either because they tend to be flat hitting through the ball. A lot of other habits come from short pips and also grips. pen holders versus shake hands players. Long pips, on the other hand, are a very defensive rubber typically. The longer the pips, the less rotation you can put on it. So, short pips, you can still play some rotation. If you watch Mima Ito with her backhand, she's incredibly versatile. Is that the specifics of the pips that she uses? Partially, but it's also, well, of course, her skill sets, right? She's worked incredibly hard to be so controlled with a variety of shots off her short pips. But long pips players have a very difficult time attacking. Monica Batra is probably the most effective with long pips who is not a chopper in today's game. She stays on top of the table and she can attack with long pips, but not nearly as aggressively as with her forehand rubber. And yes, she's twiddling, but with the smooth inverted spinny rubber, she's a lot more confident to attack, as she should be. Now, when you look at the long pips, you also want to see how much sponge is underneath. The more sponge someone has, that's sort of a sign. If they have more sponge, that means they're more likely to attack with their long pips. That gives the ball a chance to sink in and gives the long pip side of the racket a little bit more control or ability to generate spin. If someone has no sponge or very thin sponge under their long pips, that means they're going to be using it a lot more defensively. They're not going to have an easy time attacking with it, and that's fairly common either in choppers or people that play defensively on top of the table. Medium pips, it's going to split the difference between short and long pips. A little bit more versatile, you can still attack, but again, it depends how much sponge is underneath. One other type of rubber that looks like inverted rubber because it's smooth and you don't see any pips is called anti. That means anti-spin. It neutralizes the spin and it tends to be very dead slow rubber. So it looks a lot like regular rubber, but you need to know ahead of time. It's virtually frictionless. It doesn't create much spin at all, just the opposite. It neutralizes, it deadens the ball and slows it way down. So your tactics are going to change when you play someone with anti on one side. You're going to have to stay close to the table whenever you think they might be hitting it with their anti. You're going to have to be very clear on when they twiddle the racket or turn it 180 degrees, flip it in their hand to keep things confusing. There are a lot of different tactics against different types of rubbers and, more importantly, against different styles of play. Now, a rubber doesn't always determine the exact style of play that someone has. After all, I use very aggressive rubber and play a lot more defense than usual. And you'll see players like that in Europe and different parts of the world that get a bit behind the table, or some that stay right on top of the table instead of getting into mid-distance looping games. And part of that might be their physicality. If someone tends to be shorter, they don't want to get behind the table because their steps don't get them quite as far, and it just gives them too much ground to cover. So there are a lot of different indicators and clues that you can find for the style of play your opponent might bring, but equipment is definitely one of them. It sounded like your question was mostly about how to play against different styles of equipment, as opposed to finding the equipment that works best for you, but those are some of the advantages and disadvantages. You heard about the blade size. You'll see players that choose to have short pips on their forehand if they don't move their arm very quickly or get a lot of racket speed, but they flat hit the ball more. Some coaches will say your style naturally is suited for a short pips rubber on the forehand, or you seem to play defensively on the backhand and you like to be away from the table, you cover ground well, but you don't attack with your backhand. Let's put some long pips on you. Let's get you chopping. So yeah, different advantages to different styles. You can read. There are a lot of different websites for reviews. RevSpin, a friend of mine runs, I think is an outstanding review site for table tennis equipment. You can read from different people who've owned and tried different equipment, get a sense of what they think, and yeah, a lot of different useful sites out there. So do your research and experiment and try different things. Think about why someone has the equipment they have, what effect it has on the ball, and therefore how you want to build your strategy to give yourself the best chance to win against that style. All right, I hope that's helpful. Table tennis is a lifelong sport and just a giant puzzle. You're constantly looking for ways to confuse your opponent, and not only confuse your opponent, but solve the puzzle that is your opponent. So that's one of the things that makes it so much fun. So keep at it, keep living and learning, experimenting and playing and having fun while doing it. Thanks again for everything, and if you have any questions, whether they're about table tennis, life, or anything, don't be shy. Send them in to AdamBobrowConnect@gmail.com, and hopefully we can connect. I hope I can be of service. All right, thanks for everything, and as always, keep on ponging. Peace.